Kia ora koutou. I'm Nicola Sladden, the Banking Ombudsman, and it gives me absolute pleasure to be the chair of this panel today. And we were talking about power this morning. It gives me great pleasure to yield some power over this panel today and have some influence here. So look, it's wonderful to be here. The title is Nudging for Good. It's about how banks can support and influence better financial decisions with their consumers. So it's really critical. We've got a very good lineup here. We've got some very senior leaders in the banking industry, and they all share a common commitment and passion to supporting their customers' financial well-being. So they're very well suited to address any questions you have, and I'll kick off with a range of questions myself. So this is supposed to be a conversation. Please share any questions you have, but I'll kick off by asking the panel, what are you most concerned about in relation to your customers' financial lives, and what are some of the ways you're helping to support them navigate what is quite a challenging time at the moment, as we've all talked about? And thinking about how you're using technology, data, behavioural insights to better support your customers. And while you think about that, and I'll go through the panel in order, I want to repeat the challenge from Jane this morning that this session's supposed to be engaging, inspiring, and also our podcast is about coming with emotion and energy. So there you go, that's the challenge. So we'll kick off with you, Martin from BNZ.
Thanks, Nicola. Can everybody hear me? Yep. Always difficult to go first, and I've picked the wrong seat. I was going to go that end, and I've ended up this end. I think it's a really interesting question around how do you nudge a population using behavioural indicators, how do you use technology, but actually how do you use the human? So what we're trying to do is ultimately alter human behaviour at sometimes quite arm's length. So we have a relationship with about 1.2 million Kiwis. We're not going to see 1.2 million Kiwis day in, day out. And actually, they're going to be seeing you guys. They're going to be doing their day-to-day lives. And I'm responsible for a number of different areas, but one area is particularly around how we support customers in financial difficulty. And what we have really sought to do is change how we communicate. And it's been a multi-year approach, not moving from can you pay me? Can you pay me? You're behind, to really trying to engage a conversation that talks about, please get in contact with us. So give us that space with which to engage, have a conversation. And I'm very, very clear with my teams that run that. Discovery is the most important part. What is actually sitting at the root cause of the difficulties? Because having a payment plan with no understanding of root cause, with no understanding of the wider position, with no understanding that actually unless we address that root cause, we'll be back on the phone in pretty quickly. So I think there's a bit about how we use our old school methods of contact, but how we actually then upgrade that to have a really human conversation. But I'll leave others to talk as well.
That's fantastic. Would you like to go next, Ros?
I'd love to.
Great, thanks.
Tēnā tātou te iwi, ko Ros Clarke tuku ingoa ASB. Starting with what Nicola said around what are we worried about? I mean, one of the things that I'm worried about is the financial resilience of New Zealanders. And I'm worried about that because we know that 45% of Kiwis don't have a safety net. And what we mean by a safety net is they don't have the equivalent of sort of like 1 month's expenses to sustain them should a financial shock hit. And that's quite a sobering statistic. So what we've been doing at ASB since 2019, we've been working with the University of Melbourne to really understand what is financial wellbeing. And we've learnt that financial wellbeing is driven by 3 things: a really good savings habit, the ability to balance spending, and to effectively manage debt. And so we've built our program of nudges and behavioural science around those 3 things. And even more specific, we've really looked into what are the actions that customers can take or New Zealanders can take that actually make a difference to financial wellbeing. So we've got really specific on that, and we've built out our financial wellbeing program with nudges, digital tools, staff-assisted conversations, all those sorts of things, really targeted around those things that we've proven through the research with the University of Melbourne that actually will make a difference. So we're seeing really good success with that, but it's a very pivotal time for New Zealand and for banks to lean into financial resilience.
Great, thanks, Ros. Any of the other panellists want to contribute to that question, Angeline?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what you were saying there, Ros. What we are seeing is that the number of people who are spending more than they earn is increasing, which is probably not a surprise to anyone in here. But I'd just like to reiterate what you were talking about as well, the importance that banks can also play in this. So obviously we're one player in the ecosystem and everybody has a part to play. But I think the idea of us being able to support our customers' financial well-being and particularly helping them make informed decisions is a place that banks can really play and is something that we're really leaning into at the moment.
Great. And Rebecca, what about from you? I know Kiwibank's doing a big program in terms of supporting their own people to manage their financial lives more effectively. Are you happy to share what you're doing and what's working?
Yeah, absolutely, Nicola. So kia ora tata, everybody. What we're doing at Kiwibank is looking at how we support our kaimahi in terms of their financial well-being. So we have 2 financial well-being coaches that sit within my team, and I've been through the process myself, which I think earlier panelists talked about, the emotion that goes through when you're thinking about your finances, your financial well-being, and that was for me a fairly kind of confronting and challenging and emotional process to go through. But what we've done is we've launched with our coaches the program where we understand really deeply our kind of not our customers, our team members' financial situations, what their goals are, what their current spending behaviours are and patterns. So we do that through a reasonably detailed questionnaire. And then our team will have a 90-minute session with the individual, again, to really get into the depth and really understanding of that individual, because we're all different. We all have different goals, different ambitions, different challenges when it comes to finance, different levels of literacy. And really kind of going in deep with our people to really understand that is critical. And then there's a reflection time. And for me, that reflection time was really important because when I had my 90-minute conversation, I was faced with some fairly confronting choices that since COVID, my lifestyle had potentially changed a bit. And I maybe was having a bit too much fun. And some of my old savings habits kind of died in lockdown. So I needed to kind of dust off some old spreadsheets and actually get back into some of my good habits and think about how I was going to do that. So in my reflection time, I thought about that and set some goals for myself. In terms of thinking about what I wanted to do to ensure my financial future, and then the team then work with me and just have check-ins in terms of how you're going around those goals. So the program's been just incredibly successful. The team is booked out till end of August, and the demand just keeps coming from our people, which is just fantastic. And so the conversation we're having is how do we actually scale this internally and then potentially look from an external lens in terms of how we can, really amplify the work that the team's doing and make that scalable. So it's super exciting. But as you said before, don't underestimate the need to really tap into that emotional side and really deeply understand people as individuals.
Fantastic. And Mark, you can comment generally, or I was going to ask you specifically how you're at Westpac using data to determine whether or not people are making better financial decisions and how you can use data to support greater empowerment and decision making around their finances.
Awesome. I could talk about data all day. So settle in.
Remember, it's got to be exciting, inspiring.
Okay, got
energetic.
it, right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Look, thematically on data, I take the approach that the answer to your question will always be found in the pattern of your data, right? Banks, all industries hold a lot of information about customers, and it's up to us to use it to help customers. And one of the things we did coming off the back of COVID was develop a financial resiliency score for our customers. And so that was about looking at a customer's money coming in, amount going out, their ability to handle a short-term shock, e.g. cars on the brink, versus a long-term shock like losing your job. Now the good news is that during COVID, we couldn't spend any money, right? So we all built up little nest eggs, or most of us did, and then we all went out and spent it wildly. And so what that showed to us is we had customers who were at the very bottom of that financial resiliency score, and we're quite likely to end up in hardship or collections teams over the next 12 months. And so if you think about hardship and collection teams, it's all reactive stuff, right? And so our approach was, how can we turn that into a proactive conversation to reach out to those customers and say, how can we help? Now, two things. One is cold calling a customer to say, hey Mark, are you okay? We can see in your accounts that things might be a bit tough. It's a really hard cold call, right? But we put our best people on it, and it worked well. And the second thing it did was amazing for culture in those teams. When you think about that they are reactive day in, day out, the opportunity for them to be proactive and outreach to customers in that manner was just inspiring. And we had a whole heap of people, we did it voluntarily, saying, who wants to do this? We had far more people than we needed. The net result is we've called, or actually spoken to, over 1,800 people in the last 12 months who are in those lowest buckets. We have seen that a third of them are they're a third less likely to end up in our collections team, so that's good. And 15% less likely to have financial payments problems in the future, because it's just that nudge, right? Everyone's talked about nudges. It's just getting people to think about what's their financial position, what's their bad habits, how can they do things better. Most people are really open to that, and so it's been inspiring, and we'll keep doing it because it's working.
Great, thanks very much, Mark. There have been plenty of questions inputted on Slido, so I'll ask a few of those and then we'll revert back to my script if necessary. But one of the questions is around at what stage, and it goes to your point about being proactive in terms of engaging with customers before they're really struggling financially. But the question is, at what stage do banks identify that a customer is suffering hardship, and what do you currently do about that? Not just people with arrears, also overdrafts. And the key message I've heard is to contact the banks early, and equally banks are being challenged to be more proactive in contacting their customers and offering support before things get really perilous. We know, and we've heard a lot about the initiatives a lot of the banks are executing, but I also hear from some of the financial mentors that it's difficult sometimes to access some of that support. When someone's ringing up and they speak to someone on the contact centre, they don't always get that extra care or that special support that they need, and they feel that they are in many ways treated just like any other customer. So really welcome your comments about the disconnect sometimes between that lived experience and what the banks are hoping to deliver around supporting vulnerable consumers, but really more about how do you identify and respond to people who are struggling. Martin, I'm looking at you.
I'll kick off. So I think first of all, most important, we'll make sure everybody's got it. There's an inbox that BNZ has for any mentor to contact us on. I think we shared it last year. Please use that. It is manned all the time. It has the right people. We'll make sure you get to the right parts of the organisation, and indeed we are there in providing the right support. So that's a really, really important part, and we'll make sure that's shared. In terms of indicators of financial difficulty, I think we'll all have a model. I think we'd reflect on that. We're all looking for those customers who need it. The interesting part is, and it's fascinating walking on the open banking part, we only see what we see. So if somebody is multi-banked, if they're in multiple different places, we're only going to see what the part they have with us. So we've spent a lot of time trying to encourage a conversation and also self-help. So we have a tool that you can access if you have a home loan, where you can actually look at all the various options of overpaying, reducing back to minimum payments. And we have seen the uptake of that increase 300% in the last year. So customers are wanting to do this, help and support themselves. Conversely, the other area where we've certainly seen increase in financial difficulty is around council rates. So we are seeing, again, an uptick in the recent periods of customers. First of all, we call them first-time flyers, like those that have never had a council rates arrears have increased. And again, those that then get the arrears notification, then don't pay it, again, a lot of people that are first time. So I think what we are starting to see is a different shape to the customers who are in financial difficulty, and those indicators are changing. We are seeing also, unfortunately, an uptick in people cancelling their insurances. That's another really interesting, so discretionary, non-discretionary, that's a really interesting part when it comes to insurances, around how people view that, their resilience, to Ros's point. and we then go through cyclones, floods, etc. So those became very, very important at that time. But I think there's a number of indicators. Customers really want to start to sort it out themselves, and if they can sort it, they want to. But more importantly, if anybody's got any problems with contacting us, we will make sure it's abundantly clear how to get hold of us, because it's a really important part of how we operate.
Great. Looks like Ros has got something to share.
I do. Thanks, Martin. Maybe just to build on that a little bit more, I think what we certainly understand from our customers that having channels of choice is really important. So really making sure that we are opening up all pathways or all channels for customers to engage with us. And so we've done quite a lot of work on nudges actually, and maybe an example of how a nudge can play a part in that sort of channel of choice. So I'll talk about nudges briefly, sort of interacting with our front line, and maybe one more example we'll see. But on nudges and in the space of financial difficulty, one of the things that we've really leaned into is the overdraft space, because that's one thing we know about nudges from research is they're most powerful when they're really specific, really actionable, and really simple. So what we've done in the overdraft space is reaching out and nudging really high users of overdraft with sort of how to avoid fees and charges, how to set up alerts, basically how to avoid getting into further financial detriment. And what we've seen from that sort of series of nudges is 71% of customers who received those nudges avoided going into overdraft in the following months. So that's a good example of sort of like proactive digital contact. And then what we're doing in our face-to-face channels or staff-assisted area is we've really sort of put a lot more rigor around what we call our financial wellbeing review. And I'll just use a customer story to bring this to life. So a financial wellbeing review, that's the language we use at ASB. That's when the customer can have a conversation with one of our frontline bankers about their sort of holistic financial wellbeing needs and situation. So we had a customer who came into to the bank to talk to one of our people about the need for some money, a loan for a funeral. And this was a customer who was living payday to payday, didn't have any financial reserves, large sort of debt, that sort of thing. So instead of sort of initially responding to that need for money for a funeral, the staff member had a holistic financial wellbeing review conversation with the customer, and through that process they uncovered that they actually had some really ugly debt. They'd taken out a loan 4 years ago for $1,000 and had subsequently incurred, I think it was $21,000 of interest debt. So pretty horrific. And what we were able to do in that situation was consolidate the debt, provide the money for the funeral, and basically lead to a much better financial outcome and avoidance of further financial detriment. And I use that example to sort of make the point that we really want to keep leaning into how we show up for customers in digital channels and face-to-face channels, and how we pick up these broader financial wellbeing needs in those moments that matter.
Great, thanks. And Mark, a question for you from the audience. In terms of the financial resilience score available to Westpac, can the clients also see their score?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. We debated, we could, and some banks do surface it, right? Here's your kind of score. We took an approach for now that's not something we wanted to do until we got some runs on the board and understanding what it really meant, how it compared versus what we saw reactively when customers do end up in hardship or collection. So I guess in time, is it something we would surface? Quite possibly. Because ultimately customers they want, in any organisation, not just this industry, any organisation, to help them out. And they know that we know stuff about them, and they want us to use that in the right way. So I think the answer is definitely yes in the long term, but right now we're finding that proactive outreach is working really well. We're also using it for direct comms to customers around savings tips and that sort of thing, and the uptake on that is really, really powerful too.
Great. I was going to ask Angeline and Rebecca, one of the questions from the audience is about how you're engaging with customers in relation to their KiwiSaver accounts. Often when someone struggles, they might want to withdraw their funds, and I've heard from some of the financial mentors that the banks provide that single solution rather than considering their broader needs and look at a raft of solutions for a particular consumer who might be struggling. I'd welcome your comments on how banks are engaging with their KiwiSaver customers and what more you could be doing in that space.
Yeah, I think similar to the comments before, what we've done in the last year is launch a Good Chats initiative for our customer conversations. I think it's been building a bit what's been said before in terms of having that holistic conversation and treating customers as individuals and really just deeply understanding their needs. As Martin said, many customers multi-bank, so it's actually really important for us to get that full picture and really understand through what we call as Good Chats. And all our frontline teams have been, trained in that approach, and we're continuing to build and use on that. In terms of KiwiSaver specifically, from my perspective, I think we treat that as part of a good chat. It's really, again, just one need and understanding how customers think about that in relation to their other needs. And I think we think about that good chat as almost balancing all of their needs and how we can best support their customers through that, rather than focusing on individual product types at a point in time. For us, it's really about continuing to have that balance and breadth of conversation with our customer.
Great. Angeline, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would add to that KiwiSaver and accessing hardship is just one area that we're looking at when we're using our data to understand if people are struggling and if we can help them. And we've talked quite a bit about sort of existing data, transactional data already, but the conversation this morning really resonated with me, the idea that money is emotional. And particularly in my space, where a lot of work we do uses human-centred design approaches, we're really focusing on how do we complement the data that we can already see ourselves? How do we go out and understand more directly from people and directly from their experiences? And one of the areas that we've found really interesting to look at the moment is when people are in hardship, how are we talking to them? How are we explaining concepts to them? Do they understand what we're actually talking about? We've done a really interesting piece of research recently where we learned that actually probably the words that we use all the time, and we obviously have the curse of knowledge, the more you know about something, the harder it is to put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't. But we found that actually a lot of the ways we were talking in our contact centre probably weren't helping people understand more about what to do in their situations. And I have to admit, not coming from a banking background, I looked at some of these concepts that we were using and I did not understand them either. So it was, I think, a really good way of complementing the data that we see through our transactions directly with customer experiences.
Fantastic. We've got heaps of questions. One is a hot topic for the Banking Ombudsman scheme. It's about scams. At the Banking Ombudsman scheme, we're dealing with a year-on-year increase in complaints about scams. It is terribly frightening in terms of the sophistication of the scams and also the financial harm as well as the emotional harm it causes people. And it also plays into people's trust and confidence in operating online. It's becoming more and more difficult to determine what is a legitimate organisation or website and what's fake. So the question about scams is, as noted in this question, they are getting harder and harder to detect. So what are banks doing to help their customers avoid getting scammed? I wonder who wants to kick off with that response.
Am I still? Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
I'm happy to kick off. So I think this is a really tough subject because banks are at the end of a really long journey that the customer starts on. So it's very rarely somebody will contact you and say, I need your bank to give me money. And that's not how the scam works. The scam is pre that. It's back in social media. It's back in your other channels. So it's your telco providers. It is the person on the street. It is the person that grabs you. The person that's stolen your data many moons ago from a cyber attack to another organisation. So I think that's the key part here is the reimbursement, which Nicola, you and I, we discuss as of kind of responsibility for complaints, is at the end of what is normally a really long process. And how the banks and where we sit, we can use data, we can try and catch the elements, but also what's happened is a long period of social engineering. And what we need to understand and what we need to get ahead of is, what does that social engineering look like? What does a romance scam look like? A romance scam is not a 2-week period of time where you are convinced to part with your money. This is a 9-month, 10-month, 12-month relationship. And unfortunately for the bank, we're at that last part. We're in the last week of how that's kind of come together. So the big part is educating not just the public, but also anybody that interacts with anybody ongoing. Is it real? Do you think it's right? Is it too good to be true? But also looking out for people, because I think the point around romance scams is they predicate themselves. They really do target people who are lonely. And it's a numbers game. So the other thing I'll call out is a numbers game. So they will send 1 million texts, and all they need is one person to respond to that phishing text, and they've won. Okay? And that's the opposite of a lottery. If you buy bought 1 million lottery tickets, you're not going to win. But actually, they only need one of those to come through. So I think there's a range of things that we can do, but I really want to acknowledge that we are at the last part of that. And all the data gathering, data analysis, how we will get things. There are a number of big industry pieces of work. Confirmation of payee is probably one you've seen a lot in the press, which all the banks are working on live now. That will work in a scenario. But if a customer's being convinced that the person they're sending it to, it might come back with a different response. So if it comes back with an amber or a green or a red, whatever, it's okay. That's okay. It's just I'm having a struggle setting up the bank account that's going to. This is the kind of social engineering that may be going on, and we just need to make sure there is no silver bullet. And then you'll look at all the data sharing that we are doing through the Financial Crime Prevention Network. We're also looking to utilise a number of different elements, and then the anti-scam centre. So I think it's a multitude of approaches, but we've got to be really clear, the banks can only do one part, and looking at the full end-to-end stream of work, it's a very small part at the end, but very big and impactful, and we have a big responsibility.
Absolutely, it's a wicked problem, it's a global problem, it's a national problem, and a number of agencies, public and private, have a role to play, and absolutely the banks do, and they need to step up. And it's interesting to hear, I think it was Catherine McGrath from Westpac, CEO, recently announcing with the profits result, also the positive impact of some recent technology called BioCatch, which has, I think, prevented millions and millions of potential losses to consumers. So it's really exciting to hear about the steps that the industry is taking, acknowledging that you can't solve it alone, but every initiative, every step is a positive move forward. Mark, I don't know if you'd like to comment about BioCatch, and I know ANZ's about to introduce it.
Not specifically, but I mean, damn, this stuff is scary, right? If I look back even 2 years ago, the type of customers we saw getting caught up in stuff were vulnerable customers, right? Now it's everyone. I even had to have my mum out last week because she got caught out on something, and it's just everywhere. And if you think, if you take a step back, I take long bus trips, so I get time to think, but to go, society's built on, we've got a police that is there that we see solves or helps out for physical crime, stuff we can see. But all this stuff you can't see. And so it's on all of us to help each other, ultimately, to understand how this stuff works. Because if I think about my mum, she thinks there's a bunch of part-timers out there who are doing this stuff for kicks and giggles, when actually these are professional scammers who make a really good living off doing this stuff. And we need society to understand that, so we need to help each other, is what I'd say overall.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'll just ask, I'll move off scams for a bit because we could spend all day talking about that. In terms of what are some of your most effective nudges that you've implemented? And so talk about the highlights, the bouquets, but also talk about the limits potentially of nudges and what hasn't worked, and perhaps where is the role for regulation when behavioural changes just don't meet the needs. You look ready to go, Martin.
I'm always ready. So I think there's a couple of things on nudges, and again, I'll go back to the human scenario, is also enabling your frontline team to understand and spot where things are a bit unusual. So data is a really interesting one. So I'll call out gambling. Quick show of hands, which of your clients or people you support has problems with gambling and gambling spend?
That's great you're talking about that, because there are a few questions talking about what you're practically doing to support vulnerable consumers, including gambling.
I can't see the screen either, so that's,
good.
That's not
Okay.
bad. So gambling is a really big problem and increasing, and actually the impact it has with people's ability to meet their payments, but more importantly, meet their life's expenses is increasing. So we've been doing work of enabling our frontline colleagues, so those who are dealing with the day-to-day, not even customers in financial difficulty, and are working on a spot and refer. And the nudge is, do you want to talk to somebody? And the response we actually get is yes. Now, the really difficult part, and this is where it actually becomes really tough, is then that deeper conversation. That deeper conversation that says, what do you want to do about this? And how do you want to deal with this? And what we find is we refer out to the Problem Gambling Foundation, and we previously referred to Oasis as well, is customers need to be ready to engage. But this is a really interesting one around the nudging. We need people actually to engage with that, because we can't control what they do. It is a legal activity. They can use their cards for it. And the reason I talk about the nudge is we actually have a very low level success, even when we've had the conversation with change in behaviour, because we have a limited reach in how we do it. On the flip side, when we do have those customers who we can help, it is absolutely transformational. So what we're trying to do is work with the right people who have the right skills. My teams are not addiction experts. We cannot ever profess to be, but we can spot where the issues are and then try and get ahead of them. And the other thing about the nudge, and it's very much around what data we do and don't have, is gambling data is a really interesting one to break through the fourth wall on. Trying to tell somebody they have a problem with gambling through data alone is really dangerous. Because again, we do not see everything. Somebody may have their TAB account with BNZ. I think people do have their TAB accounts with BNZ. And 100% of their spend will go on gambling. Now, that would be an indicator to say, oh, we might need to give you a call, but actually we don't know what's going on. But also what people's view on gambling, how we actually start to get into the privacy, what data we do and don't have. It's a really interesting ethical debate rather than just a data analytics debate, which is really easy because it's much more black and white.
Yes, it is a delicate balance. For example, if you sort of nudged me when I was going into McDonald's for a hamburger, I'd find that slightly affronting, but it is weighing up.
It's coming, Nikki.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Angeline, any comments about what's been most successful and where some gaps are?
Yeah, I think just sticking on a similar topic there, I think what's really interesting about behavioural design is that we are all subject to biases around money, and it means that once we know what those biases are, we can design around them. I think one of the interesting things that we've been looking at recently is that sometimes you're not making processes easier, you're not removing a problem for people. Actually, sometimes adding a bit of friction is a really good thing to make people stop and think. And one of the things I was just talking about in the break before is within our app we have a gambling toggle which people can use, which just adds that bit of friction in. So just thinking about behavioural science as both making things easier and making things harder at times.
Great. Rebecca, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think just in terms of what's worked really well for us in terms of that customer engagement is that proactivity, I think, beyond the digital. So again, I think it goes back to using the data to identify where a customer might benefit from a conversation, and that can be from a range of different scenarios. But it's actually reaching out, having that human-to-human, conversation, and enable that connectivity. And what we found really successful is empowering our frontline teams in those conversations to maybe have some different empowerment to the norm, or think about things a bit differently. And we've set up some specialised teams to actually do that. And what we found with the customer response is they firstly really welcomed the proactivity, not just through a digital nudge, but actually a human has contacted them. And just really being able to talk through their problems and have somebody authentically listen. And at the end then feeling like they've been empowered themselves, they have some agency and they have some choices. And I think that's the interesting thing with Martin saying about that ethical piece in terms of, are we going to nudge Nicola when she goes into a McDonald's? I think for me, it's actually around how do we actually empower and give our customers the agency to make those choices in a really well-informed way, because we've made it simple and easy for people to think about their finances and their choices and their decisions.
Great, thanks. Mark, any comments on that from a data and behavioural insights perspective? We've got some comments around, of course, bank profits, of course, the closure of local branches and the reduction of the reduction of face-to-face services and the like. But if you want to talk about it from your perspective, mainly what nudges or behavioural science has been effective and driven good customer outcomes, that would be great.
Yeah. I think overall you can never nudge enough. So this is about, there's more than enough data to find all those opportunities. It's about prioritising the right ones. The benefits for me and my team is that a lot of the things that we do come from the interactions we have with customers. So you generally don't get it wrong because you're learning from the customer and then using it back at scale. One of the ones that's worked really well, we've all gone through mortgage refixes and we all feel that pain. But there's customers who are closer to the edge than others, and so we used nudges from a standard marketing point of view, direct marketing, but also we've called over 50,000 customers who we could see were closer, who were going to struggle more than others, and just opening that door for that conversation's super powerful. The one other comment I'd make is I've got an extra care team, I think, through the glare. I can see Warren and a couple others over there. We've seen a big increase in vulnerable customers at Westpac, and I'm sure the others have as well. And it's understanding that need behind the need. There's a situation they're in, but it's a build-up of a series of things that have happened over a period of time. As Martin was saying, could be week, could be 12 months. And it's understanding that and taking the time to pick that apart and put it back together again is so critical. And that's just human-to-human basic stuff, showing empathy, taking the time to help the customer and get them set on the right path. It's good for the bank and it's good for the customer. We've just got to keep at it.
Great. And Ros, some of the audience have asked about the role the banks play in referring your customers to other NGOs, financial mentors, budgeting advice and the like, other community organisations. Have you got any comments about the role that the bank plays in supporting customers to access the help they need?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things that is actually probably my most favourite part of my job, I think, is the work that we do with our community councils. So I'm not sure if anyone from the ASB Community Council is here today, but what we've been running this council for since 2019. It's made up of 12 sort of NGOs, and we get together every few months, and what it's really designed to do is to help us better understand the needs of vulnerable communities and to respond appropriately. We've done some awesome work together. It's really helped sort of shape our thinking. It's challenged us to do things better. It's helped to sort of remove access to banking barriers, to take a more broader approach to financial inclusion. And what's been great about this is it's enabled exactly what you've asked, Nicola, which is it's opened doorways to referral pathways and that sort of thing. So we've been able to formalise more referral pathways through that work. And most recently, we have elevated that council to now be an industry level conversation. So we had our first industry level community council conversation. I think it was last month maybe, and so early days, but hopefully it will lead it to more sort of collective effort in the areas that matter most.
That's fantastic, thank you. We've only got 3 minutes left. There are some questions about, do you think there should be more competition in banking? But I think I'll leave that to the Commerce Commission for their final report on the market study. Also about investment and support of community services, and I know that's an important and ongoing conversation about the way the industry supports all of the good work of community organisations to do their mahi. So I thought I'd leave on a Pollyanna in a Pollyanna positive way by asking you all quickly to say, if you had a magic wand, what would be the first thing that you would change within your current sort of sphere of influence to promote better customer outcomes and greater financial well-being? So starting off with Martin, 1 minute.
I definitely sat in the wrong seat. I'm not sitting here.
You're
again.
in my direct glare.
Yeah, exactly. So if I had a magic wand, oh God, it's actually an interview question.
You've got 30 seconds.
30 questions. 30 seconds. I would say increased collaboration with us as banks and this room is the absolute number one. So, but also understanding how we can work together to change the rules, change the structures, change the systems that really get in the way of delivering fair outcomes for customers.
That's a great point, because a lot of the comments about, nudging and behavioural change only goes so far. You need a whole ecosystem approach, policy, legislation, the like. Sorry, I shouldn't comment. Over to you, Angeline.
I know you said within our own responsibilities, however, probably the thing that I think would make the biggest difference is if financial well-being was a conversation that we were all willing to have at barbecues and picnics around the country. I think probably everyone in this room has a role to play in that one, and I think that would be a huge win if we could all do that.
Fantastic, thank you. Rebecca?
I struggled with this question because there's so much, and I could talk for longer than 30 seconds. I mean, look, for me, my background, I come from a low-income family. We struggled to pay the bills. We had a meter where Mum had to put coins in to pay the electric bill. And so for me, I think it's empathy and understanding is what I think we need a lot more of people who are in financial distress, and that will help reduce those who are in financial strife, reduce their own anxiety, the stigma they feel, the judgment they feel in actually coming forward and seeking for help. So I think empathy and understanding.
Brilliant, thank you. Mark,
Look,
it's a difficult one to top.
Look, I just wish financial literacy was taught in schools.
It is, but we need to do it better.
Amen. Can you go see my kids first? And Warren's I think he's leading financial education panel tomorrow. But it's about talking about money, right? It's about being comfortable talking about that stuff, understanding how money works, for better or for worse. It's what makes the world go round, or one of the things that makes the world go round. That would be my magic wand moment.
Thank you, Mark, and finally you, Ros. Bring it home.
Yeah, similar to Mark actually. Like, I'd love to be able to wave a magic wand and just lift the financial capability of all New Zealanders, and because I think that would have so many positive downstream impacts. Like, it would help us deal with like sort of the whakama and the kind of the inertia around trust and engaging with financial organisations. We'd have better quality conversations, better outcomes. So yeah, that's what I would love.
Fantastic, thank you, Ros. And our time is out, so it just leaves it for me to thank our panellists very much. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks, Angeline, Mark and Ros. You've been awesome. And